So that's today's topic. And like I was mentioning, is it's stunning in, and I think it's because of misinformation of how many people no longer support American democracy. And the first thing you're going to see in the comments, I promise you guys that are joining Chris and Loud is what you're going to be hearing is people in the comments saying we're not a democracy. Well, we are a representative democracy. Technically, you may not think we're operating as a democracy, and that's fair. But you're going to see people inevitably in the comments as this live is just getting started, more and more people talking about how they don't support the Constitution, or they make excuses, or they say the founding fathers didn't intend to actually have democracy. And it's just stunning, coming from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, where it was, universally, not entirely across the entire society, but anybody that was sensible or reasonable, whether you're Republican or a Democrat, you never questioned democracy in American democracy. You questioned all kinds of other things in terms of manipulation and corruption in government and all those facets. But now in today's world, you're actually getting people, you're getting people who are literally Nazis walking around the streets. I saw something on Reddit just today about someone who interrupted a class at a university, and he was doing, the thing you're not supposed to do when you're a fascist. But, there's literally so much abuse and discrimination and worse that's happening. And we're losing our American values and our sense of decency. And there's a lot of people to thank you, Lotus, for encouraging more viewers to share. It looks like, I can't say certain words on here because then it affects the algorithm, but it looks like the reach is definitely going down on some of these lives. And I have to wonder what's happening in the background to the algorithm and so forth. But anyways, we always have a vibrant conversation, even if there's only, 20 or 50 people generally in here. But it generally is a pretty good conversation. So tell me why you do or don't support American democracy and the Constitution, because if you are a loyal American or you consider yourself a patriotic American, whether you're Republican or Democrat, I sure hope you understand that protecting self-rule, which is democracy, right? A form of democracy. Hopefully you support self-rule, right? And a lot of people don't like the word democracy, which is just stunning. Again, I understand if you are someone who thinks that we're not operating or functioning as a democracy, that I understand. But if you are questioning self-rule and freedom and liberty, which a lot of people are, it's just stunning how many people on the right and the left are now trying to tear apart the idea that the people should have a say in their society. And they seem to want to go back to pre-World War II or pre-American Revolution, where everything was authoritarians and autocracies and monarchies and all types of authoritarian dictatorships. And we're living in the greatest time in history. Well, we were, let's say, in this 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. But now I would say we're certainly not living there as well. So if you want to join as a guest and help me answer this question, and you could be someone that doesn't necessarily no longer believe in American democracy or the Constitution, I'd love to hear from you as well, as long as you keep it civil and you think you know what you're talking about. And, or if you do support democracy, let's have you on as well. You can jump into the box and join as a guest by hitting the pink and blue silhouette icon on the bottom. And you can let me know if people think this is a controversial topic. I just think it's a very fair topic because so many people are openly claiming that America is not a democracy. And again, functioning versus technically what we are. You could clearly make an argument that we're not functioning as a democracy because this whole channel is about eliminating corruption from politics. And that's my goal, is to help educate people that it's not about left or right or fighting red versus blue. It's about who's trying to actually steal our freedoms and our liberties and twist the Constitution, including, our court system and so forth. The problem with America is not the Constitution or the technical definition of a representative democracy. It's the people in government. That's the problem, right? And we all know it's about people. It's not government. Government's not the problem. Government is just a process. And that's all it generally is. So, Mr. Global, you've been a recent guest, Mr. Global. I don't remember you on here. You're going to join in just a moment. So let's get you in. Democratic Republic. No, technically, I think you're stop the nonsense. Democratic Republic. Go back to Google. I say this with respect. We are a constitutional republic and a representative democracy. Both of those things. All constitutional republics are representative democracies. That's the technical two proper terms to define our republic. A constitutional republic, not necessarily a democratic republic. So I don't know if you're arguing against or for it. You're welcome to join as well and tell me your thoughts. Hard 19111. Mr. Global, thanks for joining. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you said that I had been in your live once before, and I don't know. Maybe this will spur your memory
Okay.
or fire it up. But we were talking about my black book that I've been writing down a lot of things that I hear from people on TikTok or in life or whatever about different ideas for ways to fix it. And then I was kind of explaining it to you, and and I was kind of perturbed by it and upset, but I didn't really say anything about it. But you said that what I had written down sounded communist.
Okay.
So, but
I,
and
I
then
don't remember it specifically, but go ahead. Maybe I referred
yes.
to it improperly. Let's see if we can clarify the error here.
Well, I mean, it was just like, so I kind of let it go. I was like, because I didn't really want to get into the deep discussions of that. But then I got off and I was like, well, let me look it up and see if what I'm doing here is communist. And it's not. So maybe I was just purveying a bad message and didn't quite articulate it well enough for you to understand what I was trying to say. So
Yeah, miscommunications happen all the time. So you obviously are leaning though more towards something that's more liberal than what the Constitution is. Is that fair?
no,
Okay.
it's no. I think so. Basically, it's like there's different. The preamble is just like it's a collective, right? And then we're like supposed to be a conglomeration of like each person or the perspective of each individual, right? So I think in today's world, like with technology and our ability to vote on things in real time, I think we have to take advantage of that. And I think our system now is very clunky and old and kind of archaic. And I'm not saying that it's wrong, but obviously it's not working well right now.
But you think that's because each individual is not voting on all the issues? Is that what you blame?
I think it's more or less like it's just not like single issues. There's too many things being voted upon at one time, and that's why I feel like nothing ever seems to like move quickly to get us into a more utopian idea of what this should be and not a dystopian idea.
Well, what you mentioned earlier, let me ask you this. So, the idea of the collective, and societies are a collective, I agree, but there's also individual liberties. So, in the high level, you're talking about the Federalist versus the Anti Federalist papers, which basically, with Federalist papers, advocated for a strong central government, and the Anti Federalist papers advocated for states' rights and strong independent freedoms, which is the whole reason we have the Bill of Rights. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution was because of this dichotomy, I guess is lack of a better word, is separation between people thought we should have a strong federal government that looked out for the collective versus individual freedoms and liberties, which was very paramount and powerful for the early Americans that wanted strong individual freedoms, whether it was voting, whether it was civil rights, and so forth, as much as it could at that time. So
Right.
I think that's sort of where you're going, this
So
dichotomy between these two things.
let me ask you this. Do you think that could we attribute part of that to like maybe the fact that maybe the population or the populace at the time wasn't as educated as maybe we are getting to be? maybe as like there's maybe more of a saturation of education, and maybe people are having a better there's a better opportunity for people to make an actual like good decision. I feel like back then people weren't, but I don't know. I mean, I didn't live in that time, right? Like, I just assumed that not everybody was like, I guess what I'm trying to say is like the average IQ of the population was maybe lower. So then they had to put it into a more centralized power to try to get things moving in the right direction. But as we start to get there, you almost have to like reverse or flip the script a little bit and give people more opinion and power.
Well, they have that sort of thing in Switzerland, which is a direct democracy. But I would also say that the founding fathers very much had deep discussions about exactly what you're talking about, because there was less broad availability of education at that time. That is true. But you could easily argue as well, the at the higher level of some of the rulers and the lawyers and the scholars, their lack of or their wealth of information they had. They were scholars. They were highly intelligent, well-educated individuals. But you're right that the overall, the population may have been the lower end was probably lower. Who knows, right? For sure. But would you argue that today that our education system in America, I think where we rank in America is somewhere in the 30s or 40s around the world in terms of education. So you'd be
Mhm.
arguing that people should have the ability to vote on most things just because of technology. And I would say both of those things are fraught with incredible amount of challenges.
Sure. I I think I don't have you heard I can't remember what the name of the school was, but there's a school in Atlanta, Georgia. And there's a guy and the gal, uh they run it, and they have one of the highest successes of educating kids to get them into college. And I don't know if I think it was on 60 Minutes or something, but the reason why I bring it up is I think obviously we need to improve our schooling, right? Maybe to make sure that it's more just universal. It's not like a biased teaching, and you're kind of just going after the core things, and it's not supposed to be this like um
Well, I agree. I mean, but you have a large Christian national group throughout this country called the Heritage Foundation and the Cambridge Institute that are actually trying to turn schooling more into a academic of religion, or have religion to be a strong part of the academic system.
I don't like that idea.
No, I think that's hard. You know, that would go against the law of the land, which is the Constitution, as the very first amendment, that the separation of church and state, where you're not supposed to have any laws that are created based on a particular religion, and that would
Yeah.
apply to schooling and forcing schools to teach religion, right?
And then it centralizes their power because they always, I mean, churches and religions, they tend to click up with each other, and they usually only hire people that they know, or people that are in their church or follow the same thing. So it really it's a s- it's a perverted way of a perversion to what it's supposed how it's supposed to work. I
right.
don't I don't I don't agree with that idea. I mean, I'm not saying that it's necessarily bad. I don't think it's the right way to do it right now.
Well, if you open it up to religion, then you got to open up to all religions, right? And then you have to teach all religions. And then is there any academics in it whatsoever outside of religion, right? But that's not what the Christian nationalists want to do. They wanted to make, they are very hell bent on creating a new form of a Christian society out of American democracy, but they don't want to call it
Yeah.
American democracy.
The pendulum swings so far, right? Like, or left. It
Mm.
swings so far one way, and then as you get Trump in here, or a Republican, or a conservative, and it feels like it swings so far, and it doesn't need to. Like, the people that are in the middle should be the ones making the decisions or having the
Well, this
conversations.
is a recent phenomenon with the last, 10 or 15 years, with the amount of influence from various special interests, right? This is not If you're thinking it's Trump's doing, Trump has allowed things to happen, but he's not educated well enough himself. He doesn't know what's happening. He talked about just today that he bragged about one of the Project 2025 architects is in his administration, like openly bragged about it. And Project 2025 is a project that's fully backed by the Heritage Foundation and the Cambridge Institute. And all their ideals are, none of these are something that Trump ran on per se. Actually, he said he didn't know anything about it. Remember, he actually
Right.
said he didn't know anything about it. So it's all
Right.
bullshit, right? But he's just a vehicle. I had someone on last week who was an openly uh, Christian national. He was incredibly well spoken, and he basically said the quiet part out loud. He says Trump is just a vehicle for what we are trying to do. And this individual was so articulate and so well spoken and knew his subject matter incredibly well. It was actually kind of spooky because you knew and you could hear the depth of his knowledge. And he basically said it up front. He said, Trump is just a vehicle. He's just, a useful idiot to the religious fascists that want to change, our democracy to something that it was never intended to be.
Right. It's it's so diabolical at times, and it seems insidious, which is when I go back to your question, tell me why you do or don't support American democracy and the Constitution. It almost seems as if the only way in my mind, well, I don't know. There's just so many variables. There's too many people. There's too many people in power that are all bunched up in groups that are controlling the narrative and pushing the envelope the way that they want it to go. And it just at times it feels like maybe you have to start from scratch, like 2.0. That's not to say that you completely eliminate the idea of the Constitution, but maybe you recreate something that's similar and there's improvements and different fail safes that we don't have now to prevent what's happening now from happening.
So the documents themselves or the structure of a government is irrelevant. It's the people that are in control of those things. Like you have for 200 plus years, you've had a general understanding and evolution that you are a civic servant and you support American values. And of course, there's been many politicians that have been off base even prior to the last 20 years. But nonetheless, it's not the structure, it's not the implementation. It ends up being the people, right? When you end up having transactional people that only care about enriching themselves and or doing things for their friends or whoever's supporting them, then you get, no matter what the form of government is, it's all destined to fail, right? And the only fail-safe we have in this country is it's supposed to be the people, the power of the people that put people in the positions that have character and moral integrity. And if we don't have character and moral integrity, then you're always going to have an effed up government. And thanks for adding the video. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I sometimes I don't like my face on here,
Yeah,
but
most people don't, but
I
it's
like
nice.
having a conversation. I've been in other lives, and I feel like with your live, it's a lot more like it feels more welcoming, and it's not so like this is you're dumb or like you're wrong or whatever. So I feel
A
more
lot of belittling that happens out there. And I will do that if someone really deserves it, but typically no.
well. I feel comfortable here. That's why I wanted
Thanks.
to turn it on.
Thanks.
So I I don't know. So I just like this idea of the collective has it's it's something that I've been working on or thinking about for like 10 plus years. And I've kept it quiet and just like, just because I was nervous about it and didn't want to be judged by it. But like, I feel like there's going to be an inflection point where like, we're going to have to do something. And I don't, obviously, I don't think violence is the right answer. I don't like the idea of that, but I'm not so sure what we're supposed to do when it feels like we've been infiltrated by these individuals that you describe. They're all part of the same colleges. They go, they're in their secrets. Well, I don't want to say that. It feels like they could be a part of like secret societies, or they've got something that they're trying to push or sell and shove down people's throats. And I just don't know how to get out of that reasonably.
Right. Right. Well, I think, well, I say, that's the reason I started this channel. I think there needs to be 50 to 70 million Americans, which is a big number. It's not, but of course, it's a fraction of the American population. They can change the direction of the world. And I would also argue that every generation in our history has had to step up and protect self-rule, freedom, liberty, and everything else. And my argument is that Gen X, my generation, and millennials and Gen Z haven't done anything to protect those liberties and freedoms. And it's part of it, and especially Gen Z. I think Gen Z is the most important generation of our time, the young people today in their 20s. It's so important if we're going to completely, this experiment of democracy is going to completely go away or not, is going to be very dependent on Gen Z. And maybe even be too late for them, but they are truly important. And the people in power, and it's not just some certain people. When you say they, there's all kinds of people organizations trying to grab power. There's the corporate monarchs, which are the corporations of Silicon Valley that are trying to take over, like the Peter Thiels and Elon Musks and others. So I call them the corporate monarchies. They're trying to take over as a corporatocracy. There are the Christian nationals that are trying to take over and make this a religious fascist society, essentially. And there are so many others. There's foreign agents and foreign governments all trying to, position themselves to have as much influence over America and American society as possible. Because what happens we're the most powerful, wealthiest nation in the world. And if they can control and influence us, they can control and influence everybody around the world. The influence that American society has and the American government has on the world is just incredibly powerful.
Yeah, it reminds me of Pinky and the Brain, the old cartoon back in the 90s. You did you
I'm
ever
not
watch
familiar with that. No, I was probably
Pinky
a
and the
little too
Brain?
old.
There was these two mouth they were a part of an experiment, a science experiment. Pinky was kind of the average, maybe a little bit slower type, and then Brain was like world domination, we're gonna take over type. And growing up, I used to watch it, and it just even my mom today is she'll talk about it and the way that I'll have conversations with her about the world and how things are going, and it's like she's like, "You watch too much Pinky and the Brain,"
Yeah.
and I think there's just too many connections. That's obviously the way they want that Mr. Global. That's why I have my name the way that it is. There's somebody who's Mr. Global. It's not me.
Right.
I'm Mr. Local, but it just it feels like it's just one person's idea of how they want it to go, and it's not everybody's idea.
Well, there are certain fundamental, and that's why we had American values. American values, and you don't have to agree with every American. There are a lot of people that say, what are American values to you versus what are they for someone else? So it's generally freedom, liberty, non-discrimination, religious freedoms, things of that nature, right? And we're poisoning a lot of our younger generation to believe that those things aren't really important, because if you don't have values and principles, then you just have chaos, right? You have to have and that's what parenting does. When you're growing up as a child, they give you fundamentals. This is this is the right way to behave, and this is the wrong way to behave. And those people who aren't like ingrained with those values at a young age, they end up becoming, the Donald Trumps of the world, right? And
Yeah.
worse, become sociopaths, and so forth.
Or yeah, sociopaths for sure.
I'm just going to read one comment because I don't know if Rick is still here, but I see this comment from Rick. I'm going to remind you, TK, that the only people who have ever defeated the fascists were communists. That's Rick. Rick is an advocate for communism.
Is he?
I've spoken to him before. He's absolutely an advocate for communism, and I'd say they're the only ones to defeat fascists. Well, I remember this little thing called World War II, where the Western Alliance, full of democracies, beat the fascists of Germany. So, Rick, I just want to say that I don't know what you're thinking, but you may have just overlooked probably the most consequential world event that's happened in the last 300 years. So, the democracies and self-freedom has defeated the fascists. They weren't the communists. So I'm sure Rick is going to respond to that if he's still here in this live.
Have you heard the JFK quote about he said that during that time, I don't know if it was true, but I thought it seemed like it was, but he said something along the lines of we were fighting the wrong people. in that war.
Who? I'm not familiar with that quote, at least not on
No.
hand. No.
Okay.
So
Well,
we have some people watching on YouTube as well, and they have some comments here. The wealth gap. I'm just as you get your any thoughts together. I don't have anybody else in the waiting room, so I can keep you on here a little longer. And just see if there's
yeah.
any
Well,
interesting comments.
tell me when you want me to go, and I'll go. But
No
it
problem.
won't. You're not going to hurt my
Well,
feelings.
together we'll read a few comments that come by the way, because I think a lot of people don't want to come on as a guest like you're doing, and they just want to comment, which is fine. There's no problems with that, right? But I think it's helpful when I respond to those comments, even though they can't respond back. Well, they can in comments, of course. So I support the Constitution. I'm not saying I'm anti-democracy necessarily, but capitalism feel like is running out of control. So Andrew 509 on YouTube is saying that, and there's a lot of truth to that. The exploitation by capitalism. And let's respond to Andrew at least, and maybe you have some thoughts on it as well. Is capitalism by its nature exploits people out of their money, and convinces them to spend their money with whatever they're trying to sell you. And he's saying it's running out of control, and that's by design. Capitalism, uncontrolled or unregulated capitalism ends up being as bad as anything else that's out there, right? It's going to exploit people in ways that are just not imaginable. And that's the point of having government. People don't like to think of regulations as a good thing. You hear the word regulations and everybody thinks it's bad. Yes, regulations have constraints. They are a pain in the ass sometimes, but regulations are the whole point of how a government controls or protects its society. So when
Yeah.
Andrew 509 says capitalism is running out of control, that's right. And the reason it's running out of control is because government is not doing its job, right? And that's because there's too much capitalism in government itself. So our government is functioning as, or there's so many capitalists and corporate influences in our government that of course it's running out of control, because when billionaires and corporations and don't pay their fair share of taxes, well, there you have it, right? So Andrew
What
509 on YouTube, there's my thoughts on your comment there.
what's that saying? There's too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yep.
There's too many chiefs and not enough Indians, I guess. I don't know.
Well, the Indians aren't in control, right? Where that's what a representative democracy is supposed to be, is the Indians elect some representation to represent them, but that's not happening.
You said that Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z haven't done much to try to fix anything earlier. And my mind, as soon as you said that, was like, well, economically, I think we're in one of, if not the worst of my lifetime positions that we've ever been. And it's like, how does the population have the time, the energy, the money, and the focus with all of the noise, the technology, just everything, the worry, the fear, to actually give it a good thought, a legitimate thought, a helpful thought. It's like, I don't think anybody has a lot of time to determine those things.
Well, I think it's strictly, maybe there's other variants to this, but I think it's strictly that the pure poisoning or pollution of our minds, thinking that we can only vote blue or red, that you can only vote one or the other. The division that's been fermented across social media over the past 20 years. Now, there's always been great division in politics, that's for sure. But in the 1800s, there were other parties, there were independents that were elected. But now there's a belief, and if you're a Gen Z or millennial, that's all you've ever known. You probably believe that being a Democrat or a Republican is the only two parties, and that those two parties are enshrined in the Constitution. Like these two things are part, and they have to be part of American democracy. When they're just independent parties, there's no mention. George Washington didn't want parties. He was against parties. But if you don't know any better, you just believe that, oh, these two parties are entrenched. That's the only way it is. And the fact is, it's not necessarily true. So I think the first step is that we, like people like me, you, and thousands of other influencers have to go against everybody that's trying to divide from the blue and the right and say, hey, wake up, people. Do you realize you actually could? It may sound ambitious. It may sound overly bold, but there's nothing that says that you can't vote a different way. And from a practical sense, they're right. You can't vote a different way. But you actually could, but it takes a movement, right? It takes a community. It might take a leader. It will take a leader of some kind to start pushing and changing people's views because they just don't know any better.
Is that what you, is that, would that be your first step? Would you eliminate the parties?
I don't think you need to eliminate the parties. But I think the first step has to be and everyone in MAGA and liberals both agree that the two-party system is broken right now. And so inherently speaking, there's nothing wrong with having two parties. It's just when two parties over time become so powerful that there's no other options and it's infiltrated by bad people, by people with interests that are not serving the people, then so I would argue that you need a third party right now or an independent party, or you need to take over one of the existing parties, just like MAGA did with the Republican Party, right? It's not the Republican Party right now.
But isn't there a fear that the same thing's going to happen to them?
Oh, of course. And there's nothing saying that, but that's democracy. Democracy is not like set it and forget it. Democracy will always require that future generations to step up. And that's no different than if you're under authoritarian rule and you want to change it, the society would have to step up, right? I mean, this is never something that is finished. It's an experiment. And if you notice with experiments really never stop.
Well,
Experiments,
it's science.
it's
Yeah,
science,
it's all
right?
science.
Right.
Yeah. And I think my instinct tells me that we do just need to just eliminate it, and that individuals that run need to be limited on their donations. Each person gets $1 million. That's it. You all have the same opportunity to get your message out to the population, um, and you don't get corporate donations. That's not how this is going to work. You don't
Yeah,
get to
that would be
get
my
bought
28th
out.
Amendment. The 28th Amendment should be that all elections should be publicly funded. So there's 27 amendments now. And I would say
That
90% of the people would agree with you. Like, I've not say, it's not just conjecture. I have tens of thousands of comments of people saying yes, and they're MAGA and liberals saying yes, that needs to happen first, right? The
that's in
elections,
my
yeah.
that's in my charter, my collective charter. That's one of the items that's in it.
Yeah, it has to be that as the first because that eliminates corruption, big money corruption from politics. And again, that one's easy. That one's would poll higher than even background checks. 89% of people want background checks on guns, right? Even NRA supporters, but we never get that passed. And I would say it's even higher probably for a 28th Amendment that would say, yeah, elections need to be publicly funded by individuals only, or like you said, maybe every candidate gets a certain amount of funding from the taxpayer to run their and time and money and so forth, whatever it might be. There are many ways
I
to
don't
skin
even
the
think,
cats.
yeah, I don't even think you give, I don't even think it's from the taxpayer. I think they've got to get people from the population. I don't think they just get to come in and that we pay for them.
Well, the only downside of that, I would say that everyone needs a starting. Like there are millions. When I ask other
Well,
Americans,
maybe I'm wrong.
yeah, I would say, if you don't have much and you don't have any wealth or you don't have a lot of influence, but you may be very well educated, you may be really wanting to come into government to help people, and you don't have a
Yeah.
way to get kick-started. Like maybe you need some help. And let me just, as you get your thoughts together, I want to answer a question from Andrew509 on YouTube. I'm aware there are other parties, but I also look at the low success rate in elections at any level, make feeling like voting independent like a wasted vote, current New York election notwithstanding. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Andrew509, you're right. If you do vote anything else other than blue or red right now, it is a wasted vote. There's no doubt about it. He's 100% correct. But I would ask Andrew509, he probably doesn't remember. I see a photo of him, but so he's not super young. But 1992 was the Reform Party with Ross Perot, which garnered 20 million votes and was polling at 39% of the election in 1992. So people think that it's impossible, it can't happen. Well, 1992 proved that it was possible. It could have happened. It didn't happen, but it proved that it could happen. And Ross Perot was a very flawed candidate in many ways, but people even then were so sick of the partisanship, and that was paled in comparison to what it is today. So people like Andrew 509, I don't know if you just maybe forgot 1992, but you'll never hear Democrats or Republicans ever bring up the 1992 election cycle.
I was born in 94, but I have watched some of Ross Perot's presidential debates when he was running. And I feel like Donald kind of stole some of the things from him. And in my mind I was thinking, I was like, the idea of tariffs may be a good idea, maybe not. I think a lot of it has to do with timing. I feel like back in 1992, that may have been a good time to do the tariffs as opposed to today, because I feel like we're getting a compound effect
Well,
with
if we want
with
to go into
everything.
tariffs, I think tariffs, you have to understand that we're the wealthiest, most powerful country in the world, and we set up the rules along with our allies of global trade and of free trade. This was our doing. We're the ones that advocated for free trade and globalism. And it was been incredibly economically a boom for America for that policy. So for us to sort of change, or Trump to say, hey, we've been operating under globalism and free trade for the past 80 years, a system that we set up and that the rest of the world, some of it reluctantly has gone along with, but let's say China, for instance, they haven't reluctantly gone along with it. What free globalization and free trade has made them incredibly wealthy compared to what they used to be. So starting tariffs and having tariff wars with our allies and our foes alike, it's like we're trying to or one administration. So that's the problem with the changing of administrations, is that we've always in the past, in terms of foreign policy, have kept the same foreign policy lens overall. No matter who the president has come in, it's like we've continued this idea of self-rule, globalization, free trade. And now we have one president that comes in and says, oh, we're going to change it, and change it literally within 24 hours and think that that's wise, right? These are our rules. We set up the game board, and now we're saying, screw you, the rest of the world, we're changing the rules. And that's not to say that some countries that already tariff us, I think Vietnam is one of those, that we shouldn't have fair tariffs or use, if they're tariffing us for certain things, that we should target tariffs if they're not abiding by the rules that we set up. Sure, but that's not what happened here, right? So I don't think tariffs, it's a terrible economic policy, and it's very isolationist, even though it has some good things as well if you're trying to bring in manufacturing back to the country, but there are other ways to do that as well.
I think that goes back to your corporate donor thing, though. Don't you think corporations were the ones that implemented for globalization so they could make
Yes.
more money?
Yes, I think that was absolutely, but we also didn't want to manufacture small goods ourselves either. So corporations could get absolutely. So capitalism played a huge role in that aspect. But that wasn't detrimental to us. That was actually ended up being very helpful. Now, I'm not saying so much manufacturing should have left the country. There should have been probably a better balance. But overall, while the influences of corporations, but American corporations, again, is as much as I rail against them at times, if they just paid their fair share of taxes, I'd rail against them a lot less. But they are also the greatest economic mechanism that we've ever had to make America as wealthy as it has, even though it has made parts of America very poor. Corporations are a devil, a good and an evil at the same time, right? So
Yeah.
I'm never advocating against capitalism, because that's incredibly been wildly successful for the United States and for China, even though they're not capitalist, they're socialistic, but they allow their corporations to, you know, operate within globalism and free trade. And by the way, one thing, I just want to reply to Andrew 509 again. Um, Andrew said, I also could see how public, privately funded elections could be a gray area. Yes, I agree. I think there's always ways to solve problems. Just blunt examples, say Elon Musk donates to a campaign. Will you view that as a private donation or from Tesla? Well, it's very clear. There used to be, well, there still is a certain amount that you can donate to a campaign as an individual. It's a very low number. I think it's less than $2,000. So all you have to do is put caps, right? If caps on individuals and how much each individual so that you don't have wealthy people saying, hey, I'm like Elon saying, I'm going to give you $1 million if you vote my way. Someone's going to be the $1 million lucky winner. So Andrew's right that it's a gray area, but not a gray area that can't be solved. It can be very easily solved. And we did have it solved before, not entirely solved, but before Citizens United, there were many more restrictions. There were actually like 3 events in the late 70s or 80s under Reagan. Then in the 90s under Bush and Clinton, they kept lowering the restrictions. There were multiple things that happened during that time frame that lowered the restrictions for campaign finances. So it wasn't just Citizens United, because everybody likes to point to that one event. It wasn't just that. There were Republican and Democratic candidates or presidents alike have reduced the regulation on campaign finance. So that's for you, Andrew 509. And he said he's 35, too old to be young, too young to be old, 35. So that means, no, but he was around for Ross Perot, but he was young. So it's everyone's fault, but your choices, Andrew. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, sorry to cut you off.
So there's this idea that I had about innovation. So like when a product or service reaches population saturation utilization, meaning it has become essential to the daily lives of the majority, it transitions into a collective stewardship. So essentially meaning that cell phones, like all of the things that we find that are essential, like cell phones, food, internet, that kind of stuff, we basically, as the collective, it's a stewardship. So it basically moves into more of a governmental, like, or a collective role in actually servicing the population to widen the median across the board for everybody.
Well, if we just made sure 2 things, let me know your thoughts, because this is where I always lead with it. If billionaires and corporations were all paying their fair share of taxes like individuals do, we would generate an additional $3 trillion thereabout.
Yeah.
That would move our revenue up from 5 trillion to 8 trillion. That could support safety net programs, that could support healthcare, that could potentially be used to pay down the debt, which we could pay down the debt if we used it all. We could pay down the debt in 13 years. It's not that hard if everyone was paying their fair share of taxes. But the point is, you'd have so much revenue, and at the same time, you have to also cut out the fraud and the waste. And the right always goes crazy when I say it's a revenue problem. It's not a revenue problem. It's a spending and a revenue problem. It's never just one thing. It's dynamic. Right. But if you did that and you lowered taxes for normal people, so there could be a stronger middle class, right? And you had the proper regulations on, let's say, housing, for instance. You can't control the housing market. Well, you know what you could do is you could prevent private equity firms from buying all the housing and raising up prices of housing. There should be a regulation on corporations buying houses. There's no reason. Housing, transportation, food, and healthcare. Those are like the 4 things that every society should have an ability to do. So even if you have a low paying job, you should be able to afford food and housing. Maybe not necessarily transportation, but maybe there is public transportation, and you shouldn't have to worry about your health. And right wingers will say that's nuts. And it's like, well, you're just voting against yourself if you don't believe in those 4 things. So if you wanted to make housing more affordable, one of the ways you can do is preventing private equity from buying up so much housing. You could prevent companies like Airbnb from just being available and taking over neighborhoods in certain high-profile areas. There's so many ways to skin this cat. So between eliminating corruption, making sure everybody pays their taxes, and smart regulations, I think everything, like 80% of everything, starts to get solved in very short order.
I feel like I hear what you're saying. But your vibe and your energy, I feel like you're kind of, maybe I'm a little more angry about it. I don't even want to give them the opportunity to just pay more in tax. Like, you made that thing here, you benefited off of everybody's effort in this country to make your product or to make whatever you made, yet you continue to take advantage of it. You continue to hoard the wealth. You continue to be self-centered, selfish. I want to go a step further.
But
And I
Mr.
want to say
Global,
that
they work harder than everybody else. They deserve it.
you're telling me the guy you're sitting in an office, bro. Like the guy that's in the factory making your product, you'd be nothing without him. That's why they're trying to make robots.
It's
So they could
capitalism, Mr. Global. Don't you want capitalism instead of socialism?
no, because there's something else. It doesn't have to be capitalism, it doesn't have to be communism, it doesn't have to be socialism, it doesn't have to be any ism.
It just has to be regulated capitalism, which is also an ism, but
It
that's
just but I don't even know if I necessarily agree with capitalism. I feel like it was our cornerstone on building what we're supposed to build next. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm a capitalist. I own and run my own business. I go out and I try to improve people's houses. I'm a construction worker, handyman type guy. So I'm trying to be a capitalist, but I feel like there's levels to it. And I feel like what it currently is now is they're just taking advantage of it. And
well, that's the difference,
I'm
right? You can support capitalism that's well regulated and that's serving its society. So let's take a one extreme example. Billionaires who are CEOs of corporations, and people believe that what I just said earlier, they work harder, they're smarter, and we need these people. Sure, whatever. That's fine. But the system that allowed them to gain incredible wealth and exploit the consumers at a level, and then they don't have to contribute back to that society is absurdity, right? That's the mindset of people. Like, we're not saying there shouldn't be rich people, but is there any need to have people that have hundreds of billions of dollars or tens of billions? The only way they earned $10 billion or more or hundreds of is through exploitation. And the system that either the American capitalist society has allowed them to thrive, and the very minimum that society should demand is that they pay not only their fair share, but a progressive share of taxes, just like they used to do in the 60s and 70s. You had in the industrial age, you had the Rockefellers, you had the Carnegies, you had incredibly wealthy people paying much higher levels of taxes. And for some reason, people think the Elon Musks of the world and the Peter Thiels and Mark Zuckerberg's like, oh, they just worked harder, they deserve it. And now they're becoming so powerful and they have so much money. Now they can infiltrate government and have different ideas on, we think we're so smart that we should run society.
oh my gosh.
You can go on and on,
How
right?
how how asinine is
And by the way,
that?
I don't seem angry about it. Well, I guess that's a good, I'm an optimist, but no, I'm angry about it too.
Well, I just feel like there's no negotiating with them. There's no reasoning with these people.
No, there isn't. Absolutely not. They're only people who are in those types of power are not pushovers, right? There's no sensibility or rationale anymore, reasoning with them. They are in a game against each other to dominate whatever industry they're trying to dominate. And you're right. The only solution is that the rise of the people, we've had it for hundreds of years. The people have risen up to fight against tyranny or against corporations. In the past, we had the civil rights, right? Error and so forth. So you're right. There's no reasoning with these people. You have to take it from them, right? But they control all media. So they control all the wealth. They control a majority of the media. So they control the narrative. And they've realized that, and this is no different than what Putin's did, right? If you want to take over your country and control the narrative, you control the media, so you make it state media. Then you threaten the judges and the judicial system, and you take that over, and now you control your society. And there is no reasoning with them. I agree, but we still have a voting system at the moment where if enough people wanted to do it and be convinced that you could completely change everything. Again, it sounds impossible, but it's not.
I feel like we've been pushed though to we're being pushed to such a level, and I feel like that's why we're getting a lot of these young people to lash out like they are. Is that it becomes so there comes a point where people just are so frustrated and over it that they don't there is no more let's do it the right, the way that it can be done safely. And it's hard when we can't get everybody on the same page. You said 60 or 70 million people. So how do you, I guess maybe that's what you're trying to do with your live, is you're trying to get people to come in and have this conversation to
Yes.
maybe elevate the mindset so that we can actually accomplish something. But there comes a point when talking about it is just talking. You have to take action.
Well, I'm never about talking about problems, but so there's a link on the top. So there's not too many people watching today, but on YouTube as well. Uh, there's a link that says tinyurl.com TK Civics Plan. I don't want to be just one of those content creators that just talks about the problems. There's actually a plan behind it, but that plan requires somebody to step up, and it doesn't have to be me. It could be anybody, but we need more voices that say, so I have 16,000 followers on TikTok now, right? And I just started in the summer. So it starts, I'm just like everybody else. I wake up in the morning and I'm like, is there anything I can do about this world? Nope. I'm gonna just go back and do what I normally do. And, we retreat into our controlling what we can control. And now I'm at 16,000 followers. Still nothing, not even a ripple in the social media space. But maybe that turns into 100,000 someday. No, you know what? That's still not even a ripple, but it's maybe something. And then maybe there's other people that are doing the same thing. And then maybe that turns into 1 million. And you know what? In 1 million, maybe you have a tiny wave that's starting to form. And that's just what I always say. The quote is, all bold ideas sound impossible until they become possible. And it's because I've been an entrepreneur most of my life, and I've created many products that have went from 0 people to 1 million people. And it's like, oh, well, this is no different. It's just a voice and a product. So maybe it won't succeed. Maybe it'll inspire other people to do it. But at the end of the day, you have enough time and pressure. Time and pressure is the key to any sort of success. If you want to make gold, it's time and pressure, right? The nature makes gold through time and pressure, just like coal and diamonds. And even if you're trying to do something nefarious, it's the same thing. You just can't come out and do something nefarious like what Trump and MAGA wanted to do. They didn't mean it to be nefarious, and many MAGA people are fine people and don't want the country to go in a bad direction. But they've lost some sensibilities and some sight of their American values. And I don't like to demonize them because I have a lot of wonderful friends who happen to vote MAGA and they have these certain beliefs. They fell into I always say that Trump was a unique candidate because normally you're spewing hate or hope. And politics is always about two things. It's either about hate or hope. Either you have an inspirational candidate that gives you hope, or when someone is spewing hate to get you to hate somebody and blame somebody else. Trump was one of those, even though I can't stand listening to him speak, for his echo chamber, he gave people a sense of hope. His tribe, as sick as I think it is, people who listen to him, they hear hope because he was not a politician. He was someone from the outside. He was going to drain the swamp or eliminate the deep state. And that gave those people hope. It was false hope. But at the other time, in the other half of what he was doing, he was creating an enormous amount of hate. So he used a combination of hate and hope to create this MAGA movement, which, was not planned. It's just how he is as his personality, his characteristic traits. And so I think it was really unique. And people on the left will probably hate hearing that, but you have to understand those people that on MAGA, they're hopeful that he's going to clean out the deep state. And what I always view the deep state is the same thing as what the liberals think of oligarchy. It's the same thing. It's corruption in politics by people that have no business being in politics or influencing our government. It's the same. It's the same people. It's the Elon Musk, the Peter Thiels, the foreign agents. It's the Christian nationals and the Heritage Foundation and the Cambridge Institute. It's all the same. That's the deep state, and at the same time, that's the oligarchy too. So the strange thing I think is liberals and MAGA are fighting against the same thing deep down. They just don't know it.
People like that hold a special place in my heart. People that mislead others to try to, it gets under my skin so much. You come out here, you say certain things, yet you don't do them.
Yeah, that's the thing about libertarianism. Like, are you familiar with libertarianism?
I was registered. I am registered and was registered as a libertarian.
So
But I knew that
yeah.
with my votes, I could never really change anything because, like you said earlier, it's just red and blue right now.
Well, here's the thing about libertarianism. I have many friends who claim to be libertarians. They were in the crypto space for a long time, which is the whole crypto bros are libertarians. They claim to be libertarians. Peter Thiel at PayPal, when they started PayPal, claimed to be a libertarian. So did Elon Musk. But it's not a political, well, it might be a political philosophy, but it is not a political system. It never has been. There's not a single libertarian country in the world. And it's because it's a pipe dream. It's a fallacy. It can't exist. It sounds wonderful, but I'll read it so people that are watching. Libertarianism is a political and moral philosophy centered on the rights of the individual, liberty, and consent of the government, which has evolved into several distinct forms. So it's about individual rights, equality before the law, limited government, so the small government, right to private property, and the rule of law. Like there's nothing you can argue about that. That sounds wonderful. The problem is when you have limited government, which is weak government, that's another phrase for weak government, you have extreme exploitation either by capitalism because they want less regulations. So then you have now the capitalists that will completely exploit your society. And even worse is you can't protect yourself because with limited government, you don't have an army, you don't have a powerful nation, and then you will always have sociopaths and psychopaths and dictators that will always invade and conquer. So it's sound wonderful, but it's a complete fallacy. It can't exist, and that's why not a single country on this earth claims to be libertarian. It's more of a philosophy, but it's not in human nature. It's not practical. It can't succeed.
Hmm.
You know, there's
because of human nature.
yeah, you'll always have people. So you're expecting the rule of law. People and libertarians believe that I should be able to do what I want, leave people alone, and everything will work out fine. No, there are criminals.
Right.
There are bad people. They will attack
Right.
you. So you have to have laws and police departments, and then you start going down the rabbit hole of bigger government.
This is a conversation I've had before with my girlfriend about. I feel like you could eliminate 90. Okay, maybe that's steep. Maybe between 80 and 90% of criminal acts or criminal, like if people were actually able to survive reasonably, be able to have a car, be able to have a job, put money away for retirement, be able to have health care, go when you're sick, you don't have to worry. It's like, I feel like you would eliminate not 80 to 90% of all of that stuff if people were just actually able to live
There's no doubt
without
that
having to
poverty
worry.
creates crime, but it
Well, for
does,
sure.
but it doesn't create all crime, right? Like you said, so you can't see
Well, there's
90%.
people that are born crazy.
Right. Yeah. There is nefarious people trying to do nefarious things at all times. So you're right. You know, extreme poverty or extreme class differences in economics creates crime. There's no doubt about it. Right.
I wrote down step one as a third party. So if you want to, is that in your plan up top that you pinned? Do you have a plan up there?
I do. That would be step
Okay.
3, and that would be to recruit an all new generation of temporary elected officials, of civic servants. Now, whether they would be independents or whether they would be third party or whether you would end up infiltrating another party, that just depends on very many factors. How many people do you have supporting the movement? What type of backing there is? There's lots of different, but yeah, it could be a third party, could be independents, or it could be something else.
You've got me curious now. I'm gonna look it up. I want to see your plan, just because I'm curious.
Yeah, the first,
I
I mean, it's all subject to evolve and change. It's a high level plan, but I think it has some amount of detail, and it's just to get the people thinking a little bit differently.
tinyurl/TK Civics plan.
Yeah, TikTok doesn't allow you to have links in comments or anywhere. It's underneath my profile as well. So yeah, it's not about talking about problems. You got to talk about actually there's a plan behind it. And I have no desire whatsoever I will never ask anyone for a vote. I will never be a politician, but I know how to build communities of people. So I said, well, what can I do? I can help build a community of people. And then you could get political leaders to stand up. Because I've asked this question in the past, believe that I know there's millions of Americans that have high moral integrity that would love to step up in the right environment to act as civic servants.
This is actually really legit. This looks good. I didn't realize how well put together it was going to be, but this obviously I haven't read it in depth here, but
Yeah.
this makes
There's a
a
lot to
lot of
be
sense.
desired, right? There's a lot of changes. It's just meant to be a kickoff. It's meant to sort of change minds a little bit or open up. It doesn't. So it's very hard. So people will say it's impossible. And I always like to say it's not impossible. Yes, it's a big leap, but it's not complex. Like it's not something that's so complex that you can't understand. It's literally just 5 steps. It doesn't have to be. Most things in life are not as complicated as they may seem, right? And some of the best things in the life are the most simple things in life. So a lot of people think, oh, it's crazy. You can't get rid of the Republican and Democratic Party. And you actually could. You can do anything. Like Steve Jobs said it best. Like when he said, once you realize, and because he was an entrepreneur, once you realize you can poke something and something comes out the other side and you can start manipulating, you can change it. And then he said, once you realize that everything around you is just created by people and that people can change it. And that's such a wonderful speech that he had at the Silicon Valley. Oh, what was the name of that? But it was such a wonderful speech that then that's inspiring to people. Like you don't have to be in these boxes. We play within the sandbox now, but you can change that sandbox, right? You can build castles in it. You can do something else.
You almost got to we almost just need like a flash blackout just to like revive everybody to get out of their, to get off their social media and their phones and like actually wake up. I feel like everybody's just entranced.
Well, they have you ever watched Parker and Dean Withers on TikTok here?
To be honest, I have not.
Okay, so they have the same.
Oh, Parker and Dean.
Yeah,
Yes, I
Parker and
have
Dean, right?
watched.
So they're the left. I could easily pick someone from the right as well. And there are many more of the manosphere, the Joe Rogans and the Andrew Tates and Ben Shapiro's and Charlie Kirk in the past, even more nefarious. I like to look at Parker and Dean Withers, and I am interested when I watch them. They have this enormous following, and they're Gen Z, part of this most important generation that we're going to have. And they have 4 million followers. I think Dean Withers has 4 million followers. And all he does is sit there every day and talk about, do you support Trump? Tell me why. And he debates them and he belittles them. And he's a very intelligent young man. But all he really is doing is belittling. And yes, maybe they change a mind or two here and there. But I look at him as intelligent as he is. And I would ask him, but what are you doing that's actually any different? Are you just grifting to have a large audience to make more money? Because that's no different than what Charlie Kirk did or Ben Shapiro
That's all
did.
it is.
That's all it is. So I can't believe in good faith. Either they're blind to it, and I think they're too intelligent to be blind to it, that they actually are trying to solve a problem.
Isn't it Icarus? They're flying too close to the sun. They don't even realize what they're doing to themselves.
That's right. It's exactly right. I agree.
They don't realize it. And in 10, 20, 30 years, that's when it'll all come back to them. Because that's not how you treat your fellow man. That's not how you treat your fellow human the way that they do. And to be fair, there are people that are rude to them.
Yes.
And that goes both ways. But at the same time, if it's your platform and you're putting your face up there to talk about it, you're responsible. And everything is push and pull. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So it's a short-lived thing for them, I think.
By the way, do you mind if I add another? I've never done this before. Add another guest in. He's also been a recent guest. I don't know how it'll go. We'll see how it goes. But
Absolutely.
Polaris, if you're still there, it looks like you're still there. Polaris, do you still want to join and get in on this conversation? If so, let me know in the comments, and we'll try and join because this has been really respectful, and we're not talking over one another. So let's see if we can get a third person in here that wants to do the same. So those people on YouTube, if you're wondering how you become a guest, I'm taking guests on TikTok because it's YouTube doesn't allow you to take guests, so guests have to come through TikTok, and of course you can hear their audio as well. Okay, talk about action. Polaris, you're joining. Let's see. Never done this before. I think I know you've been here before, Polaris. I don't know your stance on things, but that's okay. We'll hash it out. Hi,
Hey,
Polaris.
what's up, fellas?
Good. How you doing? Thanks for joining.
Enjoying the conversation. I felt like a fangirl in the comments section here, debating with Rick a little bit, dropping 3,000 likes, trying to get your attention. But I'm glad to be up here because one thing that really attracted me to your platform is it's action oriented. And I've really enjoyed the conversation between you guys so far. One thing I wanted to mention though, because I know you're trying to get this plan out there and, spark change. When the comments are pulled up, there's actually a rose gold and autumn carnival participate now buttons that are kind of blocking the URL. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. If you shifted it, to where the subscribe to your YouTube or TikTok is, it would be much more legible, and I think more people would probably check it out.
You mean like vertically or somehow? I've always struggled with this because I think the way TikTok displays some of these prompts, some people, it blows it up. Like on my device, it looks very clear. Even though you're right, the heart and some other things are blocking the URL, I always find it very challenging to get it properly positioned based on each
Yeah,
person's resolution.
personally, I would put it, I would put it, I would maybe just switch the rows. I would put your subscription handles where the read the plan
So TikTok is very
icon is.
limited. He's limited with. I've gone live before, and I've thought about, and I've had to do the same thing. But he can only move it to certain areas. There may not be anywhere else
But
for
I'm
it
just
to
saying
go.
switch where the YouTube is and
Got
where
it.
the read the plan is. Like reverse them. I'll
You,
send you a
you actually can
screenshot just so
see,
you can
okay,
see
that would
how it
be
looks to
awesome.
me.
Yeah, you can see the subscribe to YouTube and TikTok, but you can't see the plan link.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, there's a rose goal icon there and a fan club thing that keeps
Okay.
switching new messages
How
and
about
it
you,
just
Mr.
blocks it
Global? Do you
completely.
see the same thing or do you see a little bit different?
It's stacked. Like you've got your things in the back, but then it's like the other prompts from TikTok are over top of it.
Right. If I move
So
them
it's
all
Exactly.
down, if I move them all
it's
down,
condensed.
you guys could see them if I move them all down, let's say maybe a centimeter. Is that true?
It would almost have to be just
Yeah,
above
something like
your
that.
tell me, or yeah, tell me why. It'd have to be between the tell me why and the top would probably be the ideal spot
Okay.
for it.
Yeah,
But
I've been struggling with it because if you notice, if I lift my head up right now on my screen, now I start to block the prompt. Do you see it as well?
right. Yeah.
So if I move
It's
things down
tough.
too low, then I blocked other things. But I'm going to do a better job. So I appreciate that, Polaris, because
No big
I've been
deal.
struggling
I'll
with that.
send you a screenshot.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. So
You
looking
can,
forward to checking
in
out the
case you need my
plan
email,
for
it's
sure.
tkcivics@gmail.
Okay. I'll see if I can send it just DMs on TikTok. That'll be easier for me.
Okay, I'm not sure if it can, but yeah. Okay,
Okay.
well, go ahead.
But anyway, yeah, what I like about this channel is, action oriented. And as an independent, I didn't vote in the last election. I've become, politically motivated to get more involved and to make a change. Specifically, the issues surrounding Gaza are highly concerning to me, and the amount of influence from Israel, is also a big concern. I've talked to you briefly before about no taxation without representation and how, having 1 million people to one representative is not a fair system by any means.
I remember that.
And I agree with you that, taking a position in Congress should be more of a civic duty than a career path. And those are just some common ground, that's some common ground that we've laid before. So I'm looking to get more involved. Really, my motivation is to learn more about this space, and I've learned a lot in just a few weeks. Share ideas and organize with like-minded individuals like yourself. I'm not opposed to a good debate. I love to hear, different ideas from different people. It'll help me strengthen my argument or abandon it altogether. And hopefully, eventually, we can start to make some change, starting locally in our own communities and branching out from there.
Yeah, the more people we have, right, Whether they start locally or at the top or at the bottom is not that important, right? It's just that everyone's doing something, and we're not just fighting about the same old shit, right? We're not just fighting about issues. We should be fighting about values, not fighting about values and principles. We should be reinforcing the importance of American values and our principles of the past and how it's created the opportunity that America has had, right? Because everybody like just fights about issues, and all the issues can be solved. Every issue. There's not a single issue. You give me an issue, and I'll tell you a way that compromise where all sensible and reasonable Americans from every side of the spectrum will agree. It's just that our political representation is not in a position because of the forces behind them that prohibit them from agreeing, right? Because they're not listening to the people, right? They're listening to their corporate donors or their foreign agent donors or their religious donors and so forth.
It's very insidious. A lot of the things that are happening right now. I find it very hard to believe that it wasn't premeditated.
I don't know if it's premeditated, because who would it be premeditated? I never like to use the word they, because people use they just as a fear factor. There's no singular they. Every industry, it just means let's say taken a very broad level. The common interests are there common interests between what China wants, what Russia wants, and what the American elite of the corporations want? Are there common interests? Because you would say no, probably not. Most people say, why would corporations or capitalists, why would they agree with anything that Russia and China want, right? Because these are diametrically opposed. Capitalism and democracy has made capitalists very wealthy. But then you can just look at it at high levels. Well, no, they know that division in society helps all of them. So whether you're Mark Zuckerberg, who controlled Instagram and Facebook, when you allowed all that disinformation to happen, well, that created a lot of activity on your platforms, which allowed you to sell a lot of ads, which allowed you to enrich yourself even more. Oh, and by the way, some of these people were bots from China and from Russia infiltrating our election. Oh, but that's okay because it keeps the conversation going. And now you're dividing people even more. So now that my money and influence, when I give money to certain politicians, now I have even more weight. So just at that broad level, there are a lot of common interests, even though their ultimate interests may differ, that large, I'm not going to say all corporations, I don't like to use that. There's a nefarious group of Silicon Valley powerful people that I call the corporate, I call me the dark MAGA, or they're part of the corporate monarchy, that have vocally opposed, verbally, in public, said they believe democracy has failed, and that the only way to save democracy is to have corporations have corporatocracy and a corporate monarchy. They've used those terms, a corporate monarchy, and have a CEO as the president of the United States, which a CEO of the president of the United States is just code for a dictator or authoritarian. That's all a CEO is of a company, primarily, with a board of directors, right? Then that could be other people. So they have the same, I know, sorry to go off on a diatribe, but they have the same general interests of Russia and China, and that's to divide American society. Because if they divide, then American people can't rise up and actually do anything about it. You can just take the gun rights one, right? 89% of people want background checks, but our government doesn't do anything about it. So division, if you control anything, like if you have a family and you have some wealth, your number one goal is to protect your family and protect your wealth. And you'll do what it takes to protect your fiefdom. And they're doing it at a scale that's so much larger. So they only care about protecting what they have. They don't care about society as a whole. So I know there's that diatribe, but that's how you can see that there's a lot of interests that are the same between those groups that you wouldn't think would have similar common interests.
Polaris is getting out the frozen pizzas.
I think so.
Sorry, I was actually just making some dinner, steak and potatoes.
Is it
what
going
I'm
in the
eating right now,
microwave?
but,
I think this is a microwave dish.
No, it's a bag of potatoes, but actually I do
Okay.
microwave them to soften them because they'll cook quicker.
That's right.
But anyway, yeah. So I love what you said about division because it's so true. So what do you guys think are the issues that will unite most Americans? Because obviously identity politics runs so deep right now. So I've been thinking a lot about that particular question.
And I think the fewer the better. I don't think it should be a lot, like a big manifesto of issues. The one that I believe is the one that resonates the most that I've tested. You know, this was an experiment, being on lives and doing videos. I think it's understanding that this is a haves versus have-nots. This is a top versus bottom. This is a rich and powerful versus everybody else. And this, but even higher than that, it's the corruption by special interest corporations and billionaires. Like, and when I talk special interest,
Totally agree.
I use that term special interest broadly, and I don't like to, because when you just say it just sounds like a word, but people don't understand how deep and how many hundreds and hundreds of special interests there are. So the corporations and billionaires one's easy to understand, but when you go into special interests, you're talking about religious groups, you're talking about, like the Heritage Foundation, you're talking about various corporations, you're talking about individual issues, you're talking about foreign agents. There's so many special interests that, and we just use the term special interest, but it kind of glosses, it went over my head for a long time too. It's like, yeah, we know it's there, but who are these special interests? It's not just one group, it's hundreds of different groups. And there's a particular few that are really nefarious. And I think they are the religious fascists and the corporate monarchs. Rick thinks I'm a Marxist. TK is a Marxist.
I think you're right with keeping it simple and keeping it minimal, but I think there's also, in order to start it, there has to be one has to be the shepherd, because you can't just, it can't just be this like, let's identify the one thing, right? Because then there's no plan.
Well, I think it has to be two, because you can't do first one without the second one. So there's no way to eliminate big money from our politics with our existing politicians. They'll never vote for it, right? It's just like trying to ban stock trading. It'll never happen. They're not going to remove themselves from power by putting in their own term limits or telling that we can't accept money from their special interests and their corporations. So I think the two things that everyone, I literally have had thousands or if not tens of thousands of comments on my videos agreeing with that. It's because you can go into other things. You can go into the fairness doctrine in media, doing things about media, making sure media is somewhat regulated more differently. You can start going into all kinds of issues, but I think it has to be eliminating the corruption by big money in politics and replacing all career politicians. And I know how big of a lofty of a goal it sounds like, oh, both parties, all politicians need to go, because how else are you going to do it?
I don't think that you can without. I think you're right. I think you're right. At bottom line, something in my mind also thinks about programming some sort of AI algorithm computer that's on your side, on an independent side, my side, maybe on Polaris. It seems like he's like-minded. I don't think you can put that type of responsibility in a human's hands. They're too corruptible. But then someone can argue that computers are corruptible as well. But that's the only way that I see it working.
Well, did you know 150 million people vote in the general election for presidencies on average? So I'm somewhere around 150. 75 million of those people are not registered with either the Republican or Democratic Party. So I think there might be all three of us here. But there are more people that are not associated or not registered. Doesn't mean they're not leaning one way or the other, or don't identify as one side or the other. But there are 75 million Americans have made it a decision that I don't want to be registered with any party. So that's where my thinking is that independents and sensible or soft Republicans and soft liberals are going to have to come together and realize, you have all the power, but you have zero representation. There's no representation for independents, right? 100% of Congress is either red or blue. That means 75 million Americans have no direct representation.
Yeah, there's a really strong belief that if you're voting for a third party in this country, you're throwing your vote away. And I don't agree with that. I think if the tides start to turn and people see the numbers shift, that eventually they'll get the memo. Oh, my vote does matter, right? I can register and make a difference. But then again, there's also the integrity of our voting systems. We've got both the left and the right now claiming the other side didn't win an election legitimately, right? And then there's the whole money is corruption. So people are buying elections, right?
Yep.
So maybe we can start there. If we're going to put people in positions of power to serve civically, then maybe we could consider, how are we going to combat, lobbying, for example.
I think crypto is one of the ways you could do that with a ledger that makes all transactions visible. So then you know who's sending the money where and who's receiving it.
But is that a long-term solution with what's the computing?
Supercomputers.
No, but yeah, but what's the term? Wow, I can't believe this is why the live has gone long.
Quantum.
Quantum computing. Thank you. So yes, the blockchain. I'm a big proponent of the blockchain technology. But Polaris, you bring up a great point. Like, if it gets to that point where we completely can't trust our elections anymore, then yeah, like even the ideas we're talking about seem insurmountable, right? Then it comes to the only thing you can think of is violence after that, and which I'm trying to say.
And I would like to avoid that.
I think it's the dumbest idea ever. So a lot of people are proponents of that. They think you have to burn the house down, but there is no way to ever build the house from scratch and build it better. You have to restore the house or you have to renovate it because burning it down, people realize, oh my gosh, how dumb and ignorant that idea is.
But
So,
like the legend of the
I
phoenix,
flip.
out of the ash comes.
Yeah, sure. There's only one
We
reason.
need to rewrite the Constitution.
The only reason that yes, the only reason that the Constitution and the United States democracy ever came to the first place is because it was a green slate. It was an opportunity at a relatively clean slate to build something new where you had a relatively small population and very prominent leaders. And even then it was incredibly difficult to think that you're going to take 340 million Americans that are already divided and you're going to take something and build something that's better than this. Like, no, it's not going to happen.
That's good. Cool.
So I heard you mention, there's got to be one thing, right, that we kind of represent. You said, oh, well, there should be two things. They work synergistically. So when I think of a third party, like the Green Party, right, obviously they're synonymous with environmental issues, right? And so maybe we could theorize about this potential third party, independent party, come up with a name or a concept that people can rally behind, that both the left and the right also might identify with, and then sort of set our own charter, right? Like we're gonna nominate officials from our party who are not going to receive money, right? They're going to be nominated at scale, right? So I've mentioned this before, where I think a group of 10 people should have one representative, and you scale up from there. And the reason I picked that number is based on like tribal human psychology, right? There's something that is known as the Dunbar's number that is based on anthropology and evolution, that says we haven't evolved much beyond our tribal communities, and that humans realistically can't fathom knowing more than 150 people at most with any level of intimacy, right? So when we think about 1 million people to one representative, how well do they actually represent their, constituents' issues? But when you think of 150 people, now you can have somewhat of a structured discourse, right? That's like a town hall, right? Where everybody has a voice, everybody, and not everybody has to talk, but there's somewhat of a community there, right? And you can scale it up to even more reasonable numbers, right? You can talk 5,000 to 10,000 people, and that's usually like a small town.
I think your idea is noble, but the only thing I want to push back on is that it's almost like burning the house down. Maybe not entirely, because it makes sense. Everything, I agree with what you're saying, but it's not within the confines of what we have already established in our Constitution, right? We're limited to 435 congressional leaders. That can be changed.
But TK, that's not in the Constitution.
No, that's not in the Constitution, but a certain amount of representation per state. I would have to go into the exact details, but I think those types of things could be determined by future political civic servants. Like once you eliminate the corruption, like those things, because if you try and propose that now, it sounds even more, you're adding on to the insurmountability of how impossible even these general ideas we're talking about. So again, very noble, but I think it works sort of outside the guardrails of what are currently there.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you. And it sounds crazy in theory, right? But when you think about how people get elected, right, it does sort of have to take that grassroots approach. You know, you find 10 like-minded individuals, you work towards a common goal, you meet up with another group of individuals, you find a common ground, and you go from there, right? So I'm not saying that we have to start with the actual House of Representatives and change that law, because again, we're talking about the people who benefit from the system changing the system against their own interest, right? But I'm talking about a party that starts locally and exemplifies some of these concepts,
Yeah.
right?
My thought has always been first, versus naming a party like Elon Musk came out and said he's going to start the American First Party. Give me a break. Billionaire from South Africa that's apartheid lover, like not even a natural born American. You have no chance. But my thought is like, I don't worry about naming a party, naming a movement or anything. And it's important. I'm not denying it's not important. I'm just trying to get thinking about, can you change people's minds just behind a couple of principles? And then in the future, maybe it's a third party, maybe you call it a community, maybe it's called a movement. All important things that have to happen at some point. But if you read the plan, I don't talk about those things in specifics because there's a lot of different ways it could evolve, right? And there's no one person that has to say this is how it's going to be. It has to evolve sort of organically. And that's the problem with like convention of states. Like I hear a lot of people in my comments talk about, well, there's already the Article 4 in the Constitution about the Convention of States. Yes, there is the Convention of States. That's another viable alternative. The problem is the organization of the Convention of States is a bunch of former politicians who are just asking for money, and it's basically dead in the water. It's been around since 2014, and it has no organicity to it, right? Just like the Occupy Wall Street. If you ever want to build a people's movement, it has to be somewhat organic, and it has to be outside of the mainstream. And then you get there, right? And then you name it. It takes someone will come up with a wonderful name for something like that, right? And then you'll have a political leader that eventually comes out of it, or maybe 536 political leaders come out of it. But all those things, I think, take a little bit more time. Obviously, right now we're not even at the first step. Like I'm trying to get my foot even on top of the first step.
I'm pretty sure. I think in my mind, what I envision is it really just takes getting one person into a presidency or a position of power that is authentic, that is real, that is a reflection or more closely reflective of the population to really kickstart it. It really just takes one good person.
Yes. That was the only other way. I think there's only two ways to do this. You either build it from the ground up or some wonderful leader steps up, like a JFK, an Abraham Lincoln, a Roosevelt steps up and unites the public like never before. Right now on the radar, that person doesn't exist. That's the scary
Everybody
part.
thought it was Trump. MAGA thinks it's Trump.
Right.
He's so far disassociated with what reality is for everyone. It's impossible for him.
Right.
He can't be that guy. Even if he wanted to be, he can't.
No, Obama, the liberals thought it was Obama, right? And maybe these guys were close on each side, but that's the problem with today's world, I think, is when anyone does come up, they instantly get character assassinated or pigeonholed into one side or the other. And then they're basically prohibited from ever becoming that transformational leader. So I think it's still possible. The right person, like let's say Bernie Sanders, as the closest example, if he would have been running as an independent, and I know he has a lot of liberal views, that's fine. But there's a lot of Republicans, I know tons of Republicans that actually, and it took me a while to fully understand that actually really supported Bernie Sanders. Like, obviously he was too old, maybe he wasn't young enough, maybe he wasn't a good enough orator, but someone that is openly against both parties, and Sanders was against the Democratic Party. He rails against his own party very frequently. So I think it's going to take something like that if it's an individual. Otherwise, it has to be millions of people.
The only thing that I fear with him, though, is that A, he's been there for so long,
Yes.
but B, if he didn't find it to be wrong for what the DNC did to him for him to not leave, I don't it shows me that he has no like he doesn't have a problem with it. Like if somebody did that to me, I was the front runner,
Right.
was leading, and I got kicked because somebody else chose someone else. I would not be a part of that organization anymore.
Yep. I
So
agree.
it tells me that he doesn't have balls. He doesn't have gusto, and he's old.
Well, he's old, right? Elevator Man, I think, says it best here, even though I probably don't agree with a bunch of things that he says. He says anti-establishment, and that's what Trump was. And so he's right. It has to be two things: anti-establishment, but there's also a really other important factor. You have to have moral integrity and character. And
Right.
that's what Trump. So if Trump would have been someone that actually cared about people and had moral integrity and wasn't a transactional person, actually gave shit about society and people, the anti-establishment side he had down. So it just takes someone like Trump, but actually a decent human being. And then you might have it.
Yeah. And the Lord asks, "Who shall I send?"
I think it's funny. There's a couple of comments. I know Rick, I appreciate you always watching. It's literally in the declaration. Rick is a advocate for communism, so we don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. So extreme liberal ideology, which, hey, that's everyone's
Elevator
purview.
Man?
No, that's Rick. Rick in
Oh,
the
Rick.
comments. He has a very anti-democracy, communist advocate view. I kind of view it as like libertarianism. So, Rick, if you're still around, libertarianism is a philosophy or a theory that's no political system. Now, obviously, communism and fascism have both been political functioning. Well, how do you define functioning? But yeah, they're both actually real things in politics. But at the end of the day, they have ideals that are just not possible. So thank you. Rick's still watching, so he definitely got some comments in here. It is a real world. You said it best, Rick. It is a real world ideology that multiple countries have. Well, it's on life support. Doesn't mean it won't come back, but communism is. China's winning for a reason, as Rick says. That's not for that reason. All authoritarians, and it's winning because it's authoritarian style communism with a capitalistic society, and it's not winning. China's not winning. China will never win, Rick. China may rise up. China is not. It's much more powerful, and it's more powerful and wealthy because of globalism and free trade, because of the world of America's protecting its oceans and allowing free trade to happen. That's why China rose up in the first place. But China will self-implode because if its population decreases, it can't win. Its place in the world, it can never replace the United States of America.
And I honestly don't believe, well, I probably should be careful with what I say here. I really don't think China is this big bad wolf that everybody talks about. I think they're humans just like us. I think at the end of the day, they can be persuaded and talked to. I think it's very limiting when we jump to these bad conclusions. Now, don't get me wrong, they've done some really messed up stuff.
They are much more
China,
practical. China is practical.
Russia. Yeah.
It has been. But the problem is when you get someone like Xi, people don't realize that he's basically cleaned out any opposition to himself as well, very much like Putin has done. So it's a communist party that's operating as an authoritarian. And whenever you have that, authoritarians, they go through 3 cycles. They're like 3 phases: decade 1, decade 2, decade 3. Decade 1, they come in as strong men. They clean a house. They make everything great. Everybody loves them. Decade 2 comes along. They start getting a little harsh. So they surround themselves with yes men, and they start going too far by banning all their political opposition. But they're still viewed as, by some of the population, as very favorable. And then decade 3 comes along as they become all paranoid. They're all going to die by the sword because they have gone so far in believing that they're the only ones that can be right. And that's how authoritarians operate. It's a 3 cycles. At first they're great, and then they're not so great, and they're okay, and then now they're evil. All right, and now we got to get rid of him. And then Putin's in that third phase right now. He's in the third generation, where while you'll be perceived to believe the Russian population loves him, I'm sure there's a vast majority, not a majority, but a vast large sum of people that would think it's time for Putin to go.
That's why there is such a push for this. How can we make humans live longer with artificial organs? And how can we reverse age? Because they want to stay in power forever. They will not let it go. They can't just let it go.
Yep.
I wonder what happens to the human psyche when you're in a position like that for so long. Could you imagine just the torture that must be to know that one day you're not going to be there anymore?
Yeah. Rick thinks it's such a childish view of politics. Well, I think using the word childish view of politics, I would substitute that word. But that's okay. It's the reality.
Yeah.
Rick, it's the reality. Look at the 3 cycles of authoritarians. That's the fact.
Is Rick even real?
Rick is a real guy. He's been on these lives before. I actually like Rick. I think Rick is great. He and I have very different thoughts on things. Because, listen, if you're anti-democracy, I'm against you, right? I'm not for, I don't believe in what you're preaching. And he likes to bring up a lot of things that bad things that the founding fathers have done. And they did because they didn't have 21st century morals. They had 18th century morals. So yeah, but they had a vision to make the world a better place. And not just their vision, but, all the way through Roosevelt and others, they've continued to move that. China has a more robust democracy than the United States. I don't know, maybe. That's what Rick says. Polaris, you still here? Polaris, you must be eating.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
No, I'm still making dinner. But I'm listening to you guys. I just don't want you to hear all my clanging around and whatnot.
Understood. Well, we appreciate that.
Thinking about the prompt a little bit, don't support why don't you support American democracy and the Constitution? Well, I would say, first of all, I've been educated about the difference between democracy and a republic. So maybe we could chat about that a little bit. Do you guys think that a system of representatives forming a republic is the best way to do things because of the scale of our country and our population? Or do you think everybody should have a vote that matters on all issues, such as passing laws and whatnot?
Well, I think I
was just going to say a true democracy is when we all vote and every vote matters for everything, instead of having representatives who do it for you.
Now, I'm no deep scholar of the Roman Empire, but the Roman Empire before it was the Roman Empire was a republic. It was the Roman Republic. And I don't remember if it came from monarchy or so forth. But anyway, I think there was an ideal. The problem you generally have when you just have representation, whenever there's an executive involved in some kind, the executive, like you're seeing now, starts to get more and more power. And the Senate, in their case, a Roman, had a hard time controlling that power. So whenever you get an evil or misguided person who's seeking power, they end up overrunning any of the checks and balances they have in their representation. I'm not saying this historically speaking. I'm not saying that you can't have something that's different. It's just, how do you envision something that's different when executive power, when put in the hands of the wrong person, takes ultimate control, which also happened in the Roman Empire. So I think that ends up being the problem, is that bad people at the top, when they control the executive power, which means they control the military, right? So maybe you'd have the military and the police would have to be under a different legislative branch, under the legislative branch versus the executive branch, but that doesn't make any sense either. So
yeah, so that would be my second point to your prompt, is why don't I support the Constitution? And I'm just going to kind of like play devil's advocate here.
Sure.
And it's because it's the Constitution that's really allowed for this level of corruption to spread this far, right? There was nothing that checked it the way it's supposed to be balanced, right?
Well,
so that's where
I think that's the courts. The courts
haven't
protected that, right? The courts have failed to check that balance.
And that's again a money issue, in my opinion. You know, people can be bought in all manners of professions.
Well, that may have been, that's a great point, because you could argue that because there is no laws against Supreme Court justices, for an example, accepting gifts and bribes, they're just ethics, right? They're just their own ethics. There are Supreme Court justices, they won't accept money. I don't believe there's any laws that prohibit them from taking gifts and contributions. So you could argue that that was a failure. Maybe that could be an amendment that no judges can enrich themselves in any means other than through being their paid government positions. So,
yeah,
that may have prevented it, right?
But that's still
those elected
bribery.
officials,
Bribery is
it should be
illegal.
completely open. Sorry, go ahead, Global.
Isn't bribery illegal?
Yes, but how do you prove bribery sometimes when it's shadowed in a gift, right? When there's nothing written down as a bribe and it's not caught on camera, bribery is, that's why it's hard to bring down mobs. But yes, but they disguise it under gifts or free trips or, friendships. I think, is it Clarence Thomas? He was befriended by several billionaires, and maybe he didn't even know that over time he was going to be manipulated.
That's why the ledger, I feel like blockchain would, if everybody's eyes were on this, we could actually see it in real time, because people would be watching. They'd be making a living off of it, where they were just watching individuals who was sending them money, these groups, and we would all know. And then you could immediately dunce cap them. You just dunce cap them and say, hey, you're hitting the sideline for a good 5 years. If you want to come back, you're going to have to plead your case.
But are you also, so you're talking the monetary system moving onto the blockchain?
I know it's a double-edged sword. I know.
Okay. Yeah.
I know.
I've been in that space a long time.
Yeah.
It has wonderful potential, but the problem is, in order to get there, it takes almost a complete collapse, because the entire economic world system works on the reserve currency of the US dollar, and no one wants to see, well, crypto bros want to see it go away, but it's not in anyone's real best interest for it to go away suddenly, because if it goes away suddenly, there is complete chaos. Like, the entire world works off of our economic system and the dollar as the reserve currency. So while I think crypto will have a place, I think the only way it actually gets there is like a complete collapse of society, which is, I don't want to see that either.
But does it have to be?
I
Does
don't
it have
know.
to be?
It seems,
Can we just be like, look, this is the way we're wanting to go now. We'd love for you to hop on the train.
and we have $40 trillion in debt. See, the problem is the United States government being a debt society, which is not a bad thing, by the way. It's how the system is designed. What happens, so the Federal Reserve, American corporations, and the American government give up an enormous amount of control over the economic system of the world if that happens.
Yeah.
And how do you get that to happen?
I actually do think it's a bad thing, TK. I don't believe in a debt-based currency, and I think if we move back towards backed currency, that we'd see a lot less inflation. But that's just my very limited opinion on that. I'm not
Yeah, no, I understand people's point of view on
educated
that.
enough in economics.
Yeah, when it comes to economics, we don't have to be, we could be a debt-based society with a lot less debt, right? It's just that when people need, meaning corporations around the world, use the dollar as a currency, all currencies, all fiat currencies are designed to be inflationary. That's by design, and they all eventually do fail. So, but they have also, moving off of the gold standard in the United States into an unbacked gold has made America the wealthiest nation in the world. So there's been a lot of nefarious things that have happened because of it as well. But for the average American society, it's been incredibly an economic positive.
But
Maybe I just value, I don't value being the wealthiest nation in the world as much. I don't value, our military spending as much as you do, perhaps.
I used to not, but I do now, because when you fully grasp that without Americans' Navy, for instance, navigating the world's oceans and ensuring that there's free trade, then there's chaos. So I'm not saying there should be $1 trillion a year to our military. I would completely agree. There's probably a tremendous amount of waste in there. Of course there is. But I do value having one country that has values or has acted on values in the past, not always, we've had a lot of, I'm not an American apologist. There's been really dumb things that our American government has gotten involved with that they should have never gotten involved with. But to have an to have a democracy that's based on values, and those values are being policed by the military around the world, and democracies typically don't go to war. Peaceful people typically don't want wars. And again, there's been some examples: Vietnam, the Iran, overturning the Iran Shah in 1968, going to the Gulf War, Afghanistan, and so forth. A lot of problems. But generally speaking, other democracies don't go to war. And it's good to have a powerful military in the hands of a democracy that is the steward, or, people don't like that we're the policeman of the world's oceans and other areas. But someone has to do it. And it's with great power comes great responsibility. And it's a double-edged sword for sure. But would you rather have China do it, or Russia do it, or somebody else, or any authoritarian style government do it? See, that's the deal with the devil.
I hear you. Yeah, I definitely hear you.
I guess my only thing that I would bring up with the monetary, you said we're when you say, or when someone says we're the richest nation in the world, yet our currency isn't backed by anything of true value. It's all kind of, that's just the definition of fiat, right? So it's it's only as powerful as the conscience of the quote unquote populace, the collective of the world.
But that's no different than gold or Bitcoin. It really is.
Gold actually serves a function, though. What
function?
It goes into cell phones. It creates it's one of the vital parts of microchips.
But so does silicon, for instance, or other minerals, right? So you're talking gold as a value as a mineral versus gold as a value as a asset or a currency, which it doesn't have, right? It has a value as an asset. It doesn't have value as a currency.
Yeah, and gold is interesting too. It's because I've seen the science study that they said that they are able to actually create gold now out of its raw materials.
Oh, interesting.
So now you can just create gold out on the spot. So it's not a finite resource.
Yeah, it's not profitable though. The amount of money it costs to make gold, it would defeat its purpose. And that was some experiments done out of CERN. What I was gonna say is, I heard something I don't know the amount, maybe 10 pounds of gold or something, 10 bars of gold, or whatever it is. You could buy a house with, 50 years ago, and today you could buy a house with the same amount of gold. That's how stable it is as a currency.
I don't know if that's true. I don't think that's true, but maybe.
Wealth accumulation. You can fact check me. I'd love to know. If I leave, it kicks me out of the live. The other thing would be, and I like what Mr. Global said about, it's all kind of like a pyramid scheme, if you will. It's all propped up on itself. It's kind of like Elon Musk's wealth, right? I mean, he kind of works through leveraging his assets, but there's no actual money being passed back and forth. It's if you look at my ledger here, I'm worth X amount of dollars, and I can shift this amount of money here to get this loan for that amount of money, and it all kind of props itself up until we have to ask, what is the real value of our currency? And what is it worth if our average every citizen isn't seeing the trickle down of that wealth? We never will. Right? So what is the wealthiest nation in the world doing if its people are suffering without health care, without education, without housing?
No doubt. And I thought that Mr. Global was going in that direction, saying we're the wealthiest nation in the world, even though we have an extreme wealth gap and extreme poverty as well. No doubt.
That's a good point too. I mean, that's a big point as well.
Well, that's simple effect of unregulated or out of control capitalism, right? People not paying their fair share of taxes, corporations not paying their fair share of taxes. That there's a inequality of regulations that's happening that allow that to happen. Like if we are truly the richest nation in the world, and we are by resources and by land value, right? land value, and resources and minerals. Like the United States is one of the only countries on earth that is essentially reasonably completely self-sufficient for almost all minerals, agriculture, water, navigation, everything. And so we are the richest, but its people aren't the richest, right? So we give mineral rights to corporations from underneath our feet, and that money doesn't come back to American citizens, except if you invest in the stock market on those companies that are enriching themselves.
And what do you think that stems from? Like the broken capital, like at its root.
Corruption.
What's the
Absolutely corruption. Money, corruption in politics has to be, because they get the
well?
right. You want to change the tax laws, you change the tax laws. You want to get reduce mineral rights or be given a national park or a natural land given to a corporation, or Exxon being able to drill in the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, that's
I
just
think even further though. What's the moral or ethical issue, or is it a societal distance? It's people that are in these wealthy families that are so disconnected from people that are in poverty or went to public school but they went to private school or what. And I use the word they again. Sorry.
it's greed. Yeah, it is greed, right?
So it stems from greed.
It does. Absolutely.
Okay.
Once you have something like, yeah, you just, I can't speak to this case directly, but it has to be greed. Right. And this was something that Rick would, of course, on the comments, he'll love that because, capitalism, communism, greed and capitalism, it goes against communism, right? But Rick said that one thing he said, I want to mention this because I think it might lead to more
Here it
discussion.
is.
The US dollar is failing because the rest of the world is sick of paying the US. All right. So is the US dollar failing? Absolutely not. There's nothing to replace it, Rick. The US dollar is relatively goes up and down. How you value the dollar is not based, people would say it's going down in value. Against what? So against Bitcoin? Yes, it's going down in value. Bitcoin goes up in value, and that means the dollar is going down in value in relation to Bitcoin. But against every other currency in the world, the dollar is not failing. Sure, it's a little bit weak right now compared to the euro. That happens. It's cyclical. But the dollar is not failing because there's nothing to replace it. You'll never have BRICS replace it. So the Brazil, Russia, India, China, who's the S, South Africa, they will never replace it with a currency because those countries will never agree to anything. And they're just a tiny fraction of the world's economy with the exception of China. And China will never let those other four countries have a large say in their currency. So that's not going to happen. So it's not true what Rick says on the comments. And thanks, Jessica, for your comment as well. The US dollar is not failing. You have to replace it with something. So compared to other currencies, it's holding its value in a normal cyclical fashion, even with all of our debt. People like there's always that fear factor in United States society that BRICS is going to take over someday or the US dollar is losing value. Yeah, of course it's losing value. It's designed to lose value. So is every other currency. It's designed to lose about 3% of inflation a year in perfect circumstances. And the Chinese currency would lose value if it wasn't so tightly controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. But no one trades oil unless they're trading directly with one another. You don't trade. India doesn't want to buy oil for Russia and give them rupees or rubles, right? There's such a disconnect. So they can't agree how to pay for one another because you can only use those monies. For instance, if India buys oil from Russia, Russia wants them to be paid in rubles. India wants to pay them in rupees. Well, if Russia accepts rupees, so let's say you buy $1 billion of oil from Russia, and then India wants to give you $1 billion of rupees. Well, Russia doesn't want the rupees because the only thing they could do with those rupees is invest in India because that's the only country that's going to take 1 billion rupees. So these countries can't agree on a other currency because they can't even agree to trade between their own currencies unless they have to reinvest in that country. So that's what people fail to realize. So then they always come back to, all right, let's just trade in dollars. Oh, and we need dollars. So we're going to have to convert our currency to dollars, and who's going to accept $1 billion of our currency? Like it's complicated when you get to the scale of economics that we're talking about. You just can't you can go to anywhere in the world and give someone, relative speaking, $1, and they're going to accept it. They're going to accept it as currencies. I can't go to anywhere in the world and take a rupee and give it to someone. They're not going to accept it. I mean, that's sort of the reality of our economic system is everyone will accept a dollar, but no one's going to accept anything other than dollar or a euro. And you're going to have to convert it first. And that's why in third world countries that if you don't want to put your money in dollars in your bank, because if you're in Colombia, for instance, or Venezuela, and your dictator says, oh, we're going to take your money from your bank account, you have nothing to do. So what do? Is that's a reason that Bitcoin is so popular in third world countries and actually traded as a currency is because they can't take their Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's success comes from the countries where you can't trust your currency.
It's decentralized.
It's
Yeah.
decentralized, right? So I know many people that work for companies and they get paid in Bitcoin and they send that Bitcoin home to their parents, and then their parents will convert it into whatever currency they need to, bit by bit. They will not send the dollars down to their bank in Colombia because they don't know what's going to happen, especially if they're getting large sums of money.
Yeah.
So I know we're going way off course on democracy,
So
but
what do you, yeah, I was going to say, what do you think about states having their own currency? Because that's kind of how things were done
Wyoming
during
is
what?
starting to do that, I think.
American Revolution?
well, before the Federalist Papers, right? That was one of the arguments for creating a federal government is so that you can create a military to protect itself and you have common currencies between states, because having different currencies it's like having different languages, right? The more languages there are, the more difficult it is to trade or produce things because you have a gap in language. And when you have a gap in currency, it also creates complications. So interstate commerce becomes very difficult. Look at England. Their Brexit, removing Brexit from the European Union, has made things incredibly difficult for their fishermen and other aspects of their economy because they can't trade easily with the European Union. So again, it's sort of like a theoretical thing. It sounds great, but I don't think it doesn't work. It'd be better to have like the whole world on Bitcoin, for instance, or some other cryptocurrency, but then that doesn't,
XRP.
yeah. No, not XRP. Do not say that. No, that's not
Why not?
That's
Why
not
do you
decentralized.
think it's not?
No, that's controlled by a small group of individuals. That's the one that every blockchain advocate is like, do not buy XRP. That one is fully manipulated by a group of individuals. Yeah, look at XRP. It's more like Solana. You want Solana or Ethereum or something of that nature to be to come to being. I'd rather
Well,
have Dogecoin.
I have looked at it, and I guess I'm just curious as to what their reasoning was that it was being manipulated.
So it's been 3 or 4 years. I haven't worked on the blockchain in the blockchain industry for a while, but look it up. XRP is not a pure crypto like Bitcoin was designed to be. It's not a fully decentralized form of currency. It was meant to be a sort of like a hybrid, right? And that's why they think they could be successful, because it still gives control to the powers that be. Think of like a Federal Reserve controlling the amount of XRP that's available. I don't think it's not capped, right? It's not proof of work. Yeah.
I mean, it's the only thing that they do is that they do have like, at least from what I know, is that they have escrow, and that they put X amount of escrow back into their currency, XRP. And from the research I've done, it is decentralized. It's just Ripple, the company. Ripple, the company, is XRP itself, though, is decentralized.
Yeah, but it's a company that formed it, right? Why do...
So I just noticed in the comments somebody said that it was Jessica said, I think Texas was thinking of doing a state stable coin or something. And the reason I bring it up is because I do recall hearing of something in the Constitution that says the states are the ones who are empowered with the ability to coin their own currency.
Yeah.
Right. So just thinking constitutionally, what's the value of that? Obviously, a nationwide currency would still be important. The dollar isn't going anywhere. But the idea is to get money circulating more locally, right? Because if you have a currency that you'd have to exchange to do, federal or international business, then obviously an exchange rate would come into play. But otherwise, you'd sort of be spending amongst yourselves, which I think would actually bolster local communities.
Well, so then it's a great example. Like if Texas was, I don't know anything about it. So thanks, Jessica, for leaving that comment. If Texas was thinking of doing the same thing as a stable coin, that means it's no different than a company. And so let's think of Texas like XRP. And I'm just doing this off the cuff. But if it's there's centralized concerns, right? Decentralized versus centralized. So like XRP may, I'll get to that in a second, may be decentralized, but Texas controlling a coin would just be another centralized currency that's controlled by the government. And so like XRP, it says here, XRP is not mined. The entire 100 billion supply was pre-minted by Ripple Labs. Ripple Labs still holds a massive share of the supply in escrow and sells portions regularly, which gives them outsized control of the market. So basically they're enriching themselves, right? Because it's not just, they created these things and they're basically selling them off. And it says the XRP uses a unique node list for consensus instead of proof of work or proof of stake. And purists would argue that this makes it less decentralized and more controlled by Ripple or a handful of validators.
Okay.
So, yeah, and that's the whole, the whole promise of anything that's on the blockchain is for it to be fully decentralized. And if it's not fully decentralized, then you just have the US dollar anyway, because the US dollar is not a physical asset anymore. It's on a ledger. It's digitized. The US dollar is a digitized currency. It's just like Bitcoin, for instance, with the exception, it's fully controlled by the US government and the Federal Reserve. So, just because you have a dollar bill in your hands or a quarter and you think that's the currency, well, that's not the real currency. The currency is on the ledger.
And then I guess kind of piggybacking off of that, the argument though with Bitcoin too is that we don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is. He has the most coins, Bitcoins. The US government, X, Y, and Z. And then I think it's also that Bitcoin requires mining, and mining is very expensive because it requires energy.
That's what gives it value, right? Because it actually, just like energy, it takes energy to get gold out of the ground. And that's what actually makes the gold valuable, is the energy it takes to the gasoline and the time and the effort of people. That's what gives gold its value.
Sure. Okay.
Right. So you can think of them as very similar in what gives a currency value. It's got to be something. And if you want to make it tangible, well, it doesn't have to be something, right? Fiat currencies don't. Fiat currency, you would argue, what gives the dollar value? What gives the dollar value is the United States military. That's what gives ultimate value to the currency. You protect America and you protect American democracy and you protect our interests, and that's why the dollar is more valuable. If you're a billionaire in India or China or Russia, you don't keep your billions in a bank in Russia or China. You move it into real estate in London or Miami, in countries that have a rule of law, so that if in case the government comes and takes your money, you still have assets in a different country abroad, or you move them to Switzerland, right? So those currencies don't really have nearly as much value as the dollar because people still believe you can trust the legal system of the United States to protect your assets, which could be land, money, or other things. So when it comes to currencies, Bitcoin is an asset just like gold, and it's an asset. It's not a currency. Maybe it was meant to be a currency or thought it could be a currency, but clearly right now it will never be a currency. And it has to be an asset class then at this point, and not more like property, right? Just like property without all the things that go along with property, right? Without all the maintenance and so forth and taxes that go along with property. And the only way I could ever see Bitcoin going to a currency is if it was, because you can't just have 20 million of them, that you need more scale. So you'd have to make each Satoshi like a penny. And that would, people would get around. So instead of trading a dollar, you'd be trading sats. Like a sat would be a dollar, because then you would, it's what's it, 100 million times 20 million. And now you have a float of enough currency around the world, and then you would trade in sats. But you can't ever see it moving to sats because the blockchain, the Bitcoin community can't agree to anything, right? Because they don't, it's not controlled by anyone. So how do you get a group to change the word Bitcoin down to sats? Like, so it's just really, really complicated because of the, again, it's sort of like a leaderless, you have a leaderless currency that's, then you end up arguing for fiat currency because it has control, which is beneficial, versus decentralization, which has no control, which has its own unknown problems.
So, a control, so centralization or control, you think is critical, or that there needs to be some sort of control of a currency.
I don't know if that's true or not. It certainly seems to be, like, who really knows to answer that question? In order to continue with an existing world order, it seems like it would need to be controlled like it is now. And how do you transition to an uncontrolled, like, do you get rid of all borders and you have a singular world government that can all agree to use, like, we're talking some crazy stuff here, like, because you're never going to get, I mean, would Russia or China agree to moving to Bitcoin? Probably, because they'd like to get rid of the dollar, but maybe not, right? Because they can't manipulate and control. Like, China has strict controls over its own currencies, which has had an impact on making itself wealthy. So no, they probably wouldn't want to, talk about any authoritarian style government or communist style government or fascism. They want control. So they would absolutely not want to do it either, right? Actually, so it makes no sense for any government, any organized society to ever move to a decentralized currency, even though the populations of the world, many of them would like to see it because it gives them freedom, right? When I transfer money back and forth between banks or accounts and it takes 3 days to get my money, like, what are you doing with my money? Give me my money, right? So there is a huge problem, and this is in the United States of America, where it's generally, the restrictions are not that steep. But if I deposit $10,000, I get all kinds of questions asked to me. Where did that money come from? Then they have to report it to the federal government, and this is just $10,000. So, yeah. And we've opened up a can of worms, but I enjoy these discussions with both of you guys. It's been good.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth talking about since it seems the root of all evil, as far as government, corruption is concerned, is monetary greed. But the reality is, it's probably not going to change anytime soon, and this is just another system we have to work with, within the parameters.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure how productive it'll be to, theorize about a new one world currency.
Well, we've been distracted, and that's exactly what we rail against in politics: is stop being distracted, focus on the core issue. And the core issue is greed and corruption by people in power. Like, that has to be, I don't see us ever getting American representation back to the people unless that's the mission. Like, is there anything else? I've thought about this for years now. Like, what else would unite enough people behind something?
I think part of it though too is that, like, for, let's just say hypothetically speaking, and regardless of whether or not we would, I don't know. If, let's just say XRP is now like the new global monetary system, right? Isn't there an argument though too that because it is publicly, there are public ledgers and we can see all of it, doesn't that come with its own benefits, which then would give the people more reason to go after certain things? Because now it seems, as it is now, we can't see any of that stuff as far as I know. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, like, regardless of which one we use, I feel like it would still be beneficial for people to see different transactions and who's sending money where and how much and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. But I think it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't know, right? There's
I mean,
so
are we just going to keep staying where we are in the same position, or do we want to try something new? You know, I don't know. That's all. That's just what the question that I ask myself.
as being in someone who's been in technology a long time, technology solutions, I would clearly argue in many aspects of life, technology has created a much more unsafe world, even though we've been much more productive in a lot of ways from a human connectivity process. We know that's always been the thing of social media. We're going to be more connected than ever, and that's going to be great. Well, that part of it is maybe okay, but we didn't realize that misinformation and disinformation and overwhelming people, you know, technology has technology really made our lives much better? Yes, when it comes to the automobile and other things, but when it comes to digital technologies like social media and so forth and other aspects, boy, it's created so much harm. So leaping to a technology solution is wrought with so many future uncertainties. Like, would you ever want to move? And I hear this, and I don't know if Polaris mentioned it earlier, but move to a digital voting system. In the 20 years ago, I would have said, absolutely, we should be all digital. No, everything can be hacked. So I would rather have pen and paper, right? And humans counting it, because everything can be hacked. That's technology wise can be hacked. And that gives access to hackers and government miscontrolling things, right? So I think keeping it simple until you know what the solution is, and that's sort of what direct democracy does in Switzerland, right? They move slowly with their democracy because everybody has to vote on every issue. But it works for them. But does that work at scale? And probably not. So anyway, I think it's time for dinner. I think I have to do what Polaris
Okay.
did. I have to get some food in me.
My dinner's done. I'm putting the thermometer in the steak as we speak. But it was nice chatting with you guys. I followed both of you, and hopefully we can continue the conversation.
Yeah, hope to see you guys again in here soon someday.
Appreciate you having me.
All right.
It was good chatting.
Thanks, Jessica and Rick, for being in here as well. It looks like TikTok is definitely doing something with the algorithm already. Sad. All right, thanks for watching, those of you on YouTube and on TikTok. Sadly, some of these lives have had not sadly, but in the past, they've been 200 to 500 people. And now they're just a dozen or so or less, which is wonder what's happening. Maybe it's me, who knows? But that's why I'm trying to grow the community on YouTube as well, so I can stream there in case something happens with TikTok. So if you haven't subscribed already on YouTube, please do so. Thanks for watching, and thanks for all the comments and the likes. Thanks, Jessica. The likes help expose this to more people. And this will be the studio for the wintertime. I'll be here trying to do more lives and more videos and doing what I can to promote unity. See y'all.